Path of Exile 2's 0.4 update is launching in just 3 days' time, and last night we got an insightful interview from Talkative Try with game director Jonathan Rogers. Now, there was quite a lot of information packed into this interview, but I want to focus on one part in particular, where Jonathan is discussing the new Wyvern's Flame Breath ability.
So, for example, the Wyvern Flame Blast, in its kind of default incarnation, so this is just aside from totems, right?
Yeah.
So this is the one where the Wyvern flies up and starts burninating everything. In its sort of default incantation of that, it's an ultimate, really. You should be using it as like a boss ability if you get the opportunity. You know, like you heavy stun the boss, you start burning it. And the way that one works, by the way, is that it actually stacks ignites that add together. So unlike other ignite in the game, which you have to do a big hit.
Yeah.
This is a type of ignite where, like, every time you hit them, the ignite grows and grows and grows and grows. So, like, that one there is like a kind of interesting thing with that particular thing. So it actually works really well against bosses where you can stack the ignite really huge. But we also wanted to make sure that ability, if you want to, you can do a build which is going to get you to the point where you're just like burninating like the whole map, like you're just continuously flying around in the air for ages, doing things. But it does take, like, you know, you need this unique and you need like a few things. Like, to get to the point of you're doing that, it does require a little bit of effort.
So this is an unprecedented mechanic for Ignite in Path of Exile 2. Usually, Ignite is an ailment that only stacks a single time, and only the most damaging instance of Ignite on the target will deal damage at once. But Jonathan here says that the Wyvern's Flame Breath will stack Ignites so that you can deal more and more damage. Now, there's a few different ways that this can be interpreted, and the exact way that this skill works will be very important. The first would be that Ignite actually stacks in count from this ability, somewhat like Poison without a maximum limit, which would mean that each instance of Ignite has its own individual duration, and each instance also has its own damage, and the damage from all of those stacks is added together for a final DPS from Ignite on the target. The second would be that there's a single Ignite, and each application of Ignite adds to the damage of that Ignite. This would also mean that the Ignite duration would constantly be refreshed as it keeps being reapplied. This is the most favourable interpretation, and I also think it's the most likely one to be true. However, a third interpretation could be that there's a single Ignite, like the second scenario, but each application stores its total damage and duration within that Ignite. So even though there's only one Ignite, the damage could still fluctuate and go down once the duration of individual applications time out. Which one of these interpretations ends up being true will be important for how good this ability actually ends up being, but let's take a look at some numbers. Now, this is a level 13 gem, which requires a level 52 character, which is likely when you're able to first access the skill. I think the only stat that's likely to improve on this gem with levels is the base attack damage, which is 70% on a level 13 gem. The mana cost will likely go up, and the rage cost may also scale up. Notably, this rage cost is ignored for the first 4 seconds, and we don't currently know if that means you'll be able to activate it if you don't have any rage. So, base magnitude Ignite in Path of Exile 2 is 20% of the igniting hit per second for 4 seconds. This skill has 750% more Ignite magnitude and 70% base attack damage. So, Ignites from this skill will deal 119% of base attack damage per second for 4 seconds. That means that each Ignite will deal 476% of your attack damage across the full 4-second duration. Now, keep in mind that this is an attack that uses your equipped Talisman to deal damage. We don't know much about Talismans just yet, and we don't know about the modifiers that they'll be able to roll. Presumably, being two-handed martial weapons, they'll be able to roll basic modifiers like local increased physical damage and increased attack speed. We have this example talisman on the reveal page. This one has 1.3 base attacks per second, which can likely be scaled up with an increased attack speed modifier, but let's just go with that 1.3 base. With 800% attack speed, you'll have 10.4 attacks per second, inflicting 10.4 instances of ignite damage per second. So at exactly 4 seconds into the channel, you would have inflicted 41 instances of ignite damage, dealing a total of 4,879% base attack damage as DPS from ignite. Now that seems pretty good, but here's the part where that interpretation of how the ignite stacking actually works is going to be important, Because if it's the most favourable scenario where it's just a single ignite with damage being added and the duration being refreshed every time there's a new application, that would mean that this number can not only go a lot higher, but that the damage can also persist for a long time after you stop channeling the skill. But if it's going to work as individual stacks, or if each damage instance within the ignite is tracked for damage and duration, this is the point where those first applications of ignite will begin falling off as their durations are expiring. Now there is of course plenty of other ways to scale this damage, but the value of those scaling methods will also revolve around how this skill actually works. For example, ignite duration is less valuable if it's a single ignite that keeps having its duration refreshed, but it's going to be a much more valuable stat if each stack has its own duration. But the crazy thing about this is that we're just looking at a level 13 gem here and we're using the base speed of a talisman with no attack speed modifiers. So the actual numbers are likely going to be a lot higher than this with a high level gem and a decent talisman. Now Flame Breath is not going to be a great skill for clearing monsters unless you're able to overcome many of the restrictions such as the seemingly giant movement speed penalty while you're channeling the skill, and the cooldown and the rage generation. But for single target, this skill looks very strong indeed, especially if you're able to lock down the boss with a heavy stun or similar. I'll also note that Jonathan mentioned that Incinerate will have the same mechanics in 0.4 as well.
Okay. Oh, and by the way, with that Ignite thing, just because I saw you were kind of reacting interestingly to that, we are going to change Incinerate to use that system as well. So yeah, like it's a kind of a different thing we're trying out.
So it seems like this is something they're testing for Ignite in general in PoE 2, and I'm not going to go into the numbers of Incinerate in this video, but that skill did get a small base damage buff in the patch notes, and the stacking Ignite will be a huge damage buff on top. And it will be interesting to see if they're going to roll out these mechanics for all of the Ignite applications in future patches for Path of Exile 2. Ignite is certainly one of the lacking archetypes in the game right now, and I think this approach and perhaps the inclusion of Ignite proliferation being a thing baseline should go a long way to making these types of builds a lot stronger. But that's going to be it for this one. I just wanted to cover this skill after the reveal of the stacking Ignite mechanic. I'm quite surprised that this information is missing from the skill gem info. It may be that this mechanic was only added very recently, but who knows. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.